Hello everyone, Dr. Dan Kalish here, and I'm very excited to be working with you all. Today we're going to talk about anti-aging and the functional medicine approach to anti-aging, or as I like to call it in my own very sarcastic manner, pro-aging. When people say, are you an anti-aging doctor? I'm like, no, I'm pro-aging. I turned 55 years old yesterday. And that is a current picture of me on the board there. I feel like I am reverse aging. I feel like I'm getting younger and sillier and happier and funner every year of my life. And I want to share that ability to stay healthy with my patients, so that's why we're doing all this stuff. So I'm really privileged. My life has gone in a direction I couldn't have anticipated. I'm working now as a lead faculty member for the Institute for Functional Medicine. And that's been one of the more exciting career things that's happened to me. The last couple of years, I've been working closely with them. I've done some research with Mayo Clinic, which was pretty exciting. Right now, I have the best teacher in the world, Richard Lord, Dr. Lord. If you've been around functional medicine for a while, you know his books, Laboratory Evaluations in Integrative and Functional Medicine. I work with Richard every week now. And a lot of what we're going to talk about today is based on the work that he and I have done together in the past 3 years. And I'm still in private practice, I'm loving it and working with patients today. I mean, like this morning. And after this talk, I have another couple of patients as well. So I'm very much in the field, not just talking about this stuff theoretically, but, only talking about things that I know are going to work. Because at heart, I'm a clinician, and all the educational work that I do has always been oriented around getting other clinicians to be happier, more effective in their practices. That's really what we're all about. So today's talk, again, looking at the theories of aging, and there's a lot of interest in this subject area right now among the millennials, among the baby boomers, among just about everybody. And so this is a very timely topic, and we should all know quite a bit about this, because whether it's a 30-year-old coming in that wants to prevent cognitive decline before she hits her 60s, or if it's a 60-year-old coming in that's starting to experience cognitive decline or other issues around aging, really want to have a plan in place so you can speak in an educated way about what you're going to do to make sure that their aging process is reduced dramatically. Okay, and so 2 leading triggers, I think most people agree on this, most of the scientific community agrees that oxidative stress and inflammation are 2 of the leading, if not the leading, triggers for the aging process. We'll talk about how you can determine the risk factors for this based on the labs that we use in functional medicine. It's a very practical approach. What are the supplements and lifestyle changes that you can make to really make a difference for people, and how you can modify or slow down the aging process with a lab-based approach. I think we're the best positioned practitioners to make this happen, for a lot of different reasons, if only because, we're the ones that really understand how to order and interpret these particular labs that we're going to look at today, right? So the natural process of aging can be sped up or slowed down by a whole bunch of different things. And, there's decades of research on this. I won't get into any of the details, but slowing the rate definitively have been shown. Calorie restriction slows the rate of aging. Good luck getting patients to do that, right? Healthy diet, maybe a little easier. There's certain supplements. Meditation, we know for sure. Elizabeth Blackburn at the University of California, San Francisco, showed that meditation lengthens telomeres, and telomeres are a direct representation of, how healthy we are in terms of the aging process. So some of this is mind, some of this is body, some of this is supplements, and some of this is, lifestyle change. I'm not going to talk too much about the lifestyle change. I feel like that's sort of a different talk. But today, I really want you to become experts at interpreting the labs, so you feel like you have that confidence to interpret the labs. And then obviously the things that make us age faster, not a shock here: excess food and sugar, environmental toxins, smoking, drinking too much alcohol, those kinds of things. And what we want to look at today, though, as a focus, is 2 simple things: oxidative load and how to assess water and fat-soluble antioxidants on these labs. And then the basic inflammatory process, which you can look at in a lot of different ways. You can look at homocysteine levels, or vitamin D, or Kynurenate, which is a marker of inflammation in the brain. We'll look at some gut inflammation markers as well. So we have at our disposal, a very complex ability to assess oxidative load and to determine what are the sources of inflammation, not just is someone inflamed or not, but why are they inflamed and where are they inflamed and how can we make that better? If you have brain inflammation, not a great thing for the aging process, right? If you have high levels of oxidative stress, not a great thing for the aging process because of all the damage that triggers. So we'll talk about oxidation first, and then we're going to get into inflammation, and we're going to look at lab examples in the PowerPoint slides, and I have some extra labs if we have time at the end to review. What I'm learning in my own process of teaching is that doctors really like to learn from looking at labs, and I'm trying to show more and more practical examples and less of the chit-chat stuff in terms of just talking about slides like I am right now. So let's try to get through the slides kind of quick, and then I'll show you how to apply all this to the labs. Number one item, oxidation. It's a normal process that happens when we make energy, when we move around. What we're worried about is when it's gone to an excess, and that can cause some pretty serious problems. You could have excessive oxidative stress in an elite athlete who's an endurance athlete and runs 26 miles all the time. So it doesn't have to be something quote unquote unhealthy that's generating oxidative stress. You could also have a lot of oxidative stress because of mercury, arsenic, and lead in the human body, which are obviously extremely bad things. And so I think with this functional medicine approach, we're really looking at two simple issues. One is, what's the bad stuff that we can get rid of? The heavy metals, the chemicals, the excessive stress, the excessive exercise that is triggering oxidative stress, the stuff you can get rid of. And what are the things that you want to add in? Deep and relaxed breathing, tons of vegetables and fruit, really healthy juices, supplements when appropriate based on the labs. What are you going to add? What are you going to eliminate? And if you keep it that simple, I think this whole thing kind of comes together in an easy way. Because the lab testing that we're going to look at gets a little complicated and overwhelming, I think. So oxidative load, the amount of oxidative stress that you have, is going to impact a lot of different body systems. Unfortunately, the mitochondria are rather delicate little structures, and they are very susceptible to damage from oxidative stress. And if the mitochondria are damaged, then our energy production is going to become problematic. And there's a ton of research right now around the role of mitochondria and whether mitochondria are healthy or not in the aging process. In fact, my son, who's an undergraduate at University of Washington in St. Louis, is working on a research project for the last couple of years where they're measuring growth rates of mitochondria. He's a physicist, but they do this in the physics labs and they have all these fancy cameras and they're taking all these super high-speed pictures of mitochondrial growth rate. And there's a company called Calico, which is a Google-owned company, and Calico is coordinating with my son's research project, and Calico is an anti-aging company that Google's running, right? And so there's a huge interest in tech companies. There's a huge interest in commercial people in the regular world of commerce, in the corporate world, about how to figure out this anti-aging puzzle. And I think we're an important part of it. It's not just researchers at elite universities like my son is doing, but the folks like us that are in the trenches that actually know how to fix these problems, I think are going to be key players in how all this works. Okay, so in terms of inflammation, we're thinking about where is that happening. As I mentioned earlier, the oxidative load happens primarily, it's damaging mitochondria. You'll see in a minute we're damaging other tissues as well. The inflammation that we're worried about can be happening in the brain, can be happening in the GI tract. We want to identify the inflammation and remove it. And the inflammation is going to trigger all kinds of stress. And of course, these two things are interactive and interrelate. That's where it gets a little complicated. So inflammation triggers oxidative stress, and oxidation obviously triggers inflammation. But either way, you want to look at this package. We kind of artificially separate these issues out and try to figure out how we can slow down the aging process by reducing oxidative load and by reducing inflammation. Okay, the obvious inflammatory pathway triggers that we see every day in practice, you guys know this well already, I'm sure: gluten, pollution, GI infections, etc. Right? These are the things that are happening all the time in our patients. And then the testing that we can use, organic acids testing and ion panels, to start to reveal how all this is really playing out. And so there's a variety of different testing companies. The one that I usually use is Genova. They have a couple different panels. They have the ion panel, they have the NutriVal panel, they have the organic acids panel. There are other companies that run similar tests. You can use them as well. I just use these for convenience sakes for these markers for the lectures, but you can transpose these to other testing companies as well if you want. Okay, so the oxidative stress markers. And then, again, there's two sort of compartments we want to think about. There's the water-soluble antioxidants and the fat-soluble antioxidants. And they're measured separately. And their treatments are obviously can overlap. You can give a product that has both fat and water-soluble antioxidants in, but you kind of got to know which system's messed up because it's going to matter in terms of what where the damage could be occurring, right? So in other words, if there's water-soluble antioxidant problems, we're especially worried about the cytosol, the portions of the cell where there's a water compartment, which is where your DNA is hanging out inside the nucleus. Yeah. So these markers you see on the testing here, there's para-hydroxyphenolactate, and there's 8-hydroxy-2-deoxyguanosine, which is usually abbreviated as 8-OHDG because nobody can say 8-hydroxy-2-deoxyguanosine. I spent a long time practicing how to say that. Everyone just calls it 8-OHDG, okay? 8 like that, OHDG. So 8-OHDG is probably the more famous, probably the most famous, most well-researched of all these oxidative load markers. And if, like, for example, on this patient's lab, it's above a 4, certainly if it's above a 5, that means they have excessive oxidative stress. This one is a little less known, para-hydroxyphenolactate, a little more of a functional medicine marker, but this one shows, again, high oxidative load. If this goes high, you've got a lot of oxidative stress. And in general, these are mostly reflecting what's happening with water-soluble antioxidants. And then what are the water-soluble antioxidants? We all know them. They're all kind of famous, right? The vitamin C is probably the most famous one. What are the fat-soluble antioxidants? You're thinking about things that are in fat compartments, vitamin E, vitamin A, CoQ10. Water solubles would be things like vitamin C. It's probably the most famous one. And again, I'll show you a slide in a minute about why that's important. Here are the fat-soluble antioxidant markers. Again, you can see these on the ion panels. CoQ10, alpha and gamma tocopherol, fancy name for vitamin E. You got your vitamin A, beta-carotene. Okay, so these are the classic fat-soluble antioxidants. And if these are low, it means that the person is not adequately protecting the fat tissues in their body. And what would that affect? Well, we said water-soluble antioxidants are going to have a pretty strong negative, if there's a problem there, pretty strong negative impact, for example, on your DNA. Specifically, fat-soluble antioxidants are going to mean that your fats are vulnerable to oxidative stress. And where's fat in the body that we care about it? I mean, do you care if your belly fat gets oxidized? Probably not a lot, right? Who cares about that? But you care about if the fat in your brain gets oxidized. That would be extra bad, right? That means your brain cells are being damaged. And we all care a whole heck of a lot about whether the cell membranes, which are made of fat, are damaged. I was just joking about body fat, but whatever, so we care about fat-soluble antioxidants because we care about cell membrane integrity and we care about the brain. These are really, really important areas where we have fat and we have to protect that. So one could see then, if there's low levels of fat-soluble antioxidants, you're susceptible to lipid membrane damage, right? To fatty membrane damage. You're susceptible to brain damage, to the the cells in the brain that have a lot of fat in them. You're obviously accelerated cardiovascular disease related problems when lipids are damaged. So there's a pretty long list of bad things that happen when our fat-soluble antioxidant levels are low and when those systems are unprotected. And an equally horrific list of bad things that happen when our water-soluble antioxidants are screwed up. Okay, there's one other sort of special case here I just want to point out in case you don't already know this, which is that on a organic acids test, you'll see these 3 markers here: alpha hydroxybutyrate, pyroglutamate, and sulfate. And all 3 of these markers are in the test to assess glutathione status. So when Dr. Richard Lord was setting these tests up originally, he was the first scientist to ever run these 35-ish years ago, maybe 40 years ago, a long time ago, right? He really wanted to assess glutathione status as many ways as humanly possible because it's such an important antioxidant. Okay, so again, these three markers are all reflecting the exact same thing. How is my glutathione? If they're low or undetected, it is an extra bad thing that is happening to that person's glutathione. Dr. Lord calls it glutathione collapse. That means that system has collapsed. And when we're looking at these labs together every Monday, he and I, first thing he has trained me to do is look at the glutathione status before anything else. It's such an important player in our body's ability to protect itself. And it's not just protecting your DNA so you're at lower risk for cancer. You're also talking about metabolic syndrome and problems with blood sugar regulation. You're talking about cardiovascular disease. I mean, it's all the three big killers, right? Cancer, heart disease, and diabetes. I mean, common problems that we're seeing all the time are directly related to these nutrients that we're talking about right now. Okay, and so where we're going to see the damage from these different problems would be the mitochondria. Oxidative stress, inflammation damages mitochondria. The DNA, right? That's the water-soluble antioxidant damage that can occur there, and then cell membranes. So these are not sort of just casual problems. These are really mission-critical issues. And you can see why, if you had damaged mitochondria, damaged DNA, and damaged cell membranes, you're going to age a lot faster because you're going to have problems with your brain and your liver and your heart and, and with tumors, and you're much likely to have a short journey on this planet if these systems are not adequately working. Now, you can check and see all this stuff on labs. And so let's look at some specific labs. These are all from my patients. These are real ones, they're not made up. Again, para-hydroxyphenolactate, when that's high, indicates water-soluble antioxidant protection is needed. Usually people use what they call vitamin C flush. They give high dosages of vitamin C to try to straighten that out. If you see high levels of lipid peroxides, this is not a great example, but let's pretend like the black dot's way over here, okay? If the lipid peroxides are high, what does that mean? Well, lipid, fat, peroxides, peroxidation. They're talking about, are the lipids being oxidized or damaged? So if lipid peroxide markers are high, it means that you're having damage to the lipids or fats in your body. And remember, that's important because that's your cell membranes, that's your brain. So really important fats that we're talking about. The higher that the lipid peroxide marker goes, the more damage there is to the lipids. And what's the solution to that? Right back to what we said a minute ago, you're going to increase the fat-soluble antioxidants. And what are they? Remember, CoQ10, vitamin E, vitamin A. Those are the basics. Keep it simple. And then we can also look at mitochondrial function. And these markers are relatively complex to interpret, but the simple version is, if these markers are high, there's mitochondrial problems, and the mitochondria are an important part of this whole anti-aging plan we're trying to put together. So you want to give mitochondrial support in the form of CoQ10 and magnesium. Okay, the energy production pathways in the mitochondria absolutely dependent on these two key nutrients, CoQ10 and magnesium. There's a third nutrient that the mitochondria are perhaps the most dependent upon. And I will pause for a moment to see if anyone can type in the right answer to that question. Okay, three things that the mitochondria have to have: CoQ10, magnesium, and Pablo got it right because he's in my mentorship, and it's oxygen. Good job, Pablo. Glad you were listening in class. So, and to drive that home, I will tell a patient, take a deep breath in. We could all do this right now. And then take a deep breath out. And hold your breath out. And let's see how long you can do that. I do this every day. It's one of my Taoist breathing exercise things that I do. Anyways, I can hold my breath in for like 2 minutes, which I'm impressed with, although some people can do it for 40 minutes. The key point here is that when you start to run out of oxygen, by holding your breath, you realize, wow, this oxygen stuff is really, really important. And why is oxygen so important? Because it's helping chug along that whole electron transport chain, right, in the mitochondria. So anyways, if the mitochondria are not doing well, CoQ10, magnesium, and oxygen And so that implies breathing exercises, right? And how important oxygenation is for all this. Yeah, that guy Blaine can like hold his breath underwater, like in a straitjacket suit thing on camera for, yeah, it's crazy. My cousin Scotty in Hawaii is a diver. He can hold his breath for like 5-6 minutes. You know, he's a free diver, dives down, grab an abalone or a crab or whatever, come back up. But yeah, I can only get 2 minutes. It's clearly a mind over matter kind of thing to do that. You got to be able to slow your heart rate down and everything. But anyways, we're not asking patients to hold their breath for a long time. We're just kind of, wanting to make sure they do a breathing exercises so they stay well oxygenated. And in fact, there's, a big part of chronic fatigue is people don't breathe well. So it's not all supplements. We want to include the lifestyle changes as well. Magnesium, CoQ10, and a breathing exercise when somebody has a problem with their mitochondria. Your body is pushed into an inflammatory state when these nutrient sensing pathways get messed up. So the famous one, right, would be insulin regulation, high glucose levels, lots of sugar, lots of carbs is going to create a pro-inflammatory state. Keeping your glucose levels reasonable and balanced, perhaps we'd even say low, is going to keep you in an anti-inflammatory state. So if you go out and you eat, a ton of pasta and a bunch of cake and ice cream, you're going to be inflamed. And if you're having a salad and some lean protein, you're probably not going to get as inflamed. The other super famous pathway that's all in the news and everyone is thinking and talking about a lot now is mTOR and AMPK, but mTOR in particular. When mTOR levels are low, that implies a decrease in inflammation. And so this is part of the genesis, same with AMP kinase. The part of the genesis behind the intermittent fasting that's really popular right now is that if we can keep our mTOR levels low, we're at much lower risk of developing a whole variety of pretty life-threatening problems like cancer. And so there's a lot of research oriented around mTOR. mTOR is complicated. It's hard to understand. It's hard to even pronounce, but it's the mammalian target of rapamycin. Some people call it the mechanistic target of rapamycin. It's worth reading about. It's very interesting. There's this science team that went to Easter Island and they found this thing, and there's a long story behind there. But the idea being that we want to make sure that mTOR, that we want to decrease inflammation. There's very real physiological mechanisms at play for that. Okay, and I'll show you some of the lab testing implications of mTOR in a minute. Okay, so berberine is, I don't know, we've all been using this in practice forever. I mean, in my first 3 months in practice in 1992, we were using berberine for all kinds of things. Now we realize that it mimics the effects of AMP kinase and makes your body think that you didn't eat. How convenient is that? I used to use it in the 90s as a gut program thing, right, to clear up dysbiosis and gut infections. But it turns out it has all kinds of other great effects on your liver and whatnot as well. And then you go back and you think, well, how new is this? Well, the mTOR discovery is new, but this is a picture of my buddy Ajahn Ondako. So when I was in my early 20s, I went to Thailand and I signed up for a Buddhist monastery. I spent 2 years in this monastery, and my very good friend at the time from the States was with me, and he ended up staying. This is a very recent picture of him. He ended up staying, and now he's been a monk for almost 30 years, which is pretty cool. I only lasted for 2 years before I drifted back to the United States. But anyways, when we were in the monastery, and still to this day, the Ajahn here eats 1 meal a day. The Buddha said that that was the rule book 5,000 years ago, okay? I don't know when, if Buddha used the term intermittent fasting and knew about mTOR, but clearly this is not a new idea. In terms of, again, sort of back to the roots of the world, when you're thinking about how can you really increase antioxidant protection for your patients, you can do simple stuff. Like when you look at the ORAC values, right? ORAC value means like how potent an antioxidant the product is. You look at the ORAC values of some of these basic things like rosemary, thyme, and cinnamon, you'd just be immediately drop everything. You could just drop everything now, listen to the recording later, go to the spice store near your house and buy all these things, because this is like the way to longevity, right? We want to keep our antioxidant levels up. And turns out, ironically, spices and herbs do that. with this astronomically high ORAC values. I personally am really into supplements and selling a ton of supplements, but I always want to give patients, lifestyle changes too. Obviously, I sell a lot of antioxidant supplements. As a whole other thing. But I want to have lifestyle changes, wrapped into that. And I find, for most people in the beginning, just telling them what the right foods are isn't going to move the needle enough, and that we need to supplement heavily with, very aggressive supplement programs in the first maybe 6 months or a year of a protocol, and then eventually kind of, move it to the point where they're doing, a lot of this with food. Another classic way to get antioxidant protection is polyphenols. And so polyphenols, this is, the whole resveratrol thing, and this is the green tea thing, and this is the really important molecular structures, right? And another kind of fun fact here is that the molecular structure of most of the polyphenols we eat, they're just physically too large to cross into the gut lining and to get absorbed. Isn't that crazy? So all those blueberries, all that red wine, all that stuff that people are doing, the green tea extracts, all the polyphenol supplements that people are doing, and the polyphenols from foods are never absorbed by the human body. How crazy is that? When I read about that, I just couldn't even believe it, right? And we can measure these polyphenols with organic acids testing. Who even knew? That's what these markers are. Benzoate, hippurate, phenylacetate, phenylpropionate, parahydroxyphenyl acetate, right? Phenol, you see the phenol in there? Phenol, these are phenols. So these markers on organic acids, and they're on the ion panels, they're on the organic acids testing, they're on the NutrEval tests. We're looking at these every day. These are direct measures of polyphenol consumption. And what ends up happening is we can't absorb the polyphenols, but the gut microbiome use them as a food supply. So as we eat our polyphenols, the good bacteria in the gut start to grow out, and these markers on organic acids are measuring polyphenol consumption. So if you have a patient and these markers are all low, like this person, like undetected, 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 kind of low, this is someone who's not getting enough polyphenols from their diet. So I developed a poly prebiotic supplement recently, which is kind of cool. You can give them polyphenols in a supplement form. Obviously, you also want to get them to eat their blueberries and their broccoli and all the stuff that's going to be rich in polyphenols. But anyways, I, again, believe strongly in supplementing to get people out of the hole that they dug for themselves. You get a patient like this that's just low across the board, give them the polyphenol supplements, and then, get them to start doing the foods as well. Now, when these markers go high, it means that there's a dysbiosis. But when these markers are low, you're looking at a lack of fruits and vegetables. Okay, so again, polyphenol markers on ion panels, organic acids test, or NutrEvals. We look at these every day. Go back, look at your old labs, and you'll see the people who are not getting enough polyphenols. You can put them on one of the polyphenol supplements along with a diet change. All right. I'm just trying to point out the things you might not already know, because these are things that I didn't know. I kind of learned late in my career that I wish I had known. Like the polyphenol marker. Who knew that, right? Like, I bet most of you didn't know that. That's like weird. Like, we always think of these markers as only being a problem if they're high. It turns out they're a problem if they're low too. So inflammation in organ systems. Let's talk a little bit about inflammation after all this talk about oxidative stress. So I'm going to zip through these because we're expecting you guys kind of know this stuff already. But there are a bunch of triggers for inflammation, right? There's the microbes, there's the foods like gluten, there's the toxins. Seems like all the patients we work with have all these problems, right? Almost everybody has some imbalance in their gut. Most people we work with do not eat perfectly, or they wouldn't have gotten sick in the first place. And everyone that we work with, hands down, has got some kind of level of toxin exposure. That's just sort of the way it is now. And so when all this is being driven, those things, when all this is, coming into play, those things are going to, trigger inflammation. You're then going to have, either as a result of a poor diet or just as a result of inflammation in and of itself, like environmental toxins alone will trigger a problem with insulin reactions. And now you've got, a whole nother level of pain that's going on. So with the organic acids testing, you can measure these markers quite easily. Of course, you can check their blood sugar as well, right? But again, these markers here, pyruvate, lactate, beta-hydroxybutyrate, are looking at the body's ability to process insulin properly, and whether there's inflammation that's driving an insulin response. Doesn't tell you if it's the fact that their mother-in-law is visiting and they hate their mother-in-law and they're stressed, or if it's overeating sugar, or if it's environmental toxins. Any of those things could drive insulin through the roof, but you just want to be able to be on the lookout for that as a source of inflammation. We need to, if we're going to control oxidative stress and inflammation, obviously insulin is a big part of that, one of the primary players in that. You can also see if there's inflammation in the person's brain that you need to address. Kynurenate is the main pathway that shows that there's inflammation in the patient's brain. And I see this every day of the week. Kynurenate levels high. Wow, this one's really high. Look at that. Okay, so the cutoff for high levels is a 1, and this person's at a 14. Okay, the 95th percentile out here is a 1.5. This person's almost 10 times that. So this is a highly, highly inflamed brain. Okay, and that's obviously not going to be great for the aging process. So you have to figure out where the inflammation is coming from. Again, it's usually coming from the gut, maybe from toxins. And kynurenate is a sort of deserves special attention, I think, because the brain is so delicate. And when we think of anti-aging, at least for me, I think about Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, any kind of cognitive decline, neurological conditions are just devastating. So you want to have that, uppermost in your mind when you're, and they scare people too, right? They scare people a lot. Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, cognitive decline, I think they scare people a lot more than building up of plaque in your arteries. It's just a scary thing to think that your brain's going to get all screwed up. So anyways, you want to make sure that you can see this dynamic on the labs and understand how kynurenate works and find that inflammation and start to treat it. And you can also work with, correcting kynurenate levels directly, giving them some tryptophan and whatnot, but that's kind of not what we're thinking about. It's just sources of inflammation. Another big source of inflammation would be the GI tract. Okay, so we all do tons of GI testing in our practices. You see GI inflammation markers all the time. Calprotectin is a famous one, right? And then chemicals can cause, and toxins, chemicals, heavy metals, etc., can cause inflammation. So you can see on liver detox profiles like this one. Again, this is organic acids, and we're seeing sulfate and pyroglutamate and glucarate elevated. Methylhyperate high means there's xylene exposure. So this is someone who, if they are inflamed, would be coming from liver detoxification issues. So again, could be gut, could be liver, could be brain. We want to know where the inflammation is coming from. You address the brain if it's kynurenate, you address the gut if it's the gut, you address the liver if it's the liver. And overall, any of these things that cause inflammation is going to really push someone hard into, a more not only pro-inflammatory, but like a, accelerated aging state, right? So if we can reduce inflammation, we can reduce oxidative stress, then we're going to go a really long way to making these things better. All right, so let's look at a couple of labs here. I'm going to show you some examples. Oh, one more slide. Oh, we talked about this already, glutathione, right? That's another follow-up with the liver. But let me show you some real-life examples here. You can see how this plays out. So patient comes in, they're like, hey doc, I feel great, but I don't want to, drop dead of a heart attack, cancer, or develop a neurodegenerative disease in the next 30 years. So we're not talking about solving complex, I'm in crisis kind of situations. We're talking about, just for the sake of this class, how would you prevent a healthy person from aging? What are the kind of things that you're going to see? And so this is a basic ion panel from Genova. You could also be doing Nutravals as well, very similar. And I just want to highlight out the portions that we're talking about. So, and remember, I'm going to even just write this down. You should all write this down just for 1 second. Remember what mitochondria, remember that? DNA, and mitochondria gets damaged, DNA gets damaged, and lipids or cell membranes or fats. So as we're going through these labs, we're thinking about, okay, what are the things that are wrong with the mitochondria that's going to accelerate aging? What are the things that are wrong with the DNA markers that could accelerate aging? And what are the things that are wrong with the fatty acids or the fats? Okay, that's one way to think about it. Another way to think about it is what's the oxidative stress load, what's the inflammatory load like? So you can look at it either by the process, like oxidative stress is a process of damage. inflammation is a process of damage, or you can look at it by what's damaged. Mitochondria get damaged, the DNA gets damaged, and the lipids get damaged. See what I mean? So you can look at it either way. And usually when you're interpreting the labs, you're thinking a little bit more about what is getting damaged in this patient, because that's going to give you an example of what you have to fix. Is it the brain, the liver, the gut, right? So, because we're always, I think in general, clinicians don't think theoretically. They're like, what am I going to tell this patient on Tuesday afternoon at 3:30 about their lab that's anti-aging related? So I think more, the bigger picture is this oxidative stress umbrella, right? And this inflammation umbrella. But then when it really comes down to rubber meets the road stuff, we're talking about how are your mitochondria? How is your DNA? How are your lipids? Are those tissues getting damaged or not? And if you want to get all fancy, you can talk about things like mTOR, but that's a little more sophisticated. Most patients won't follow that discussion so well, right? So let's go through these labs just real quick, thinking about it from the systems perspective: mitochondria, DNA, and lipids. Let's do the mitochondria first. So what did we say? Remember, three most important things for mitochondria: magnesium, CoQ10, and oxygen. So right off the bat, this patient is low in magnesium. Right off the bat, you know there's a major problem with their mitochondria. There has to be, because the mitochondria rely upon magnesium for every single facet of energy production. You can then skip down to coenzyme Q10. Remember, it's magnesium and CoQ10. Oops, not very good there either. Low magnesium, low CoQ10, that's poor mitochondrial function. That's accelerated aging right there, right off the bat. Okay, that's one project. All right, project number 2, DNA. Well, remember we said you kind of focus on antioxidants, you know, and it's somewhat of an artificial distinction, but I think it's helpful. You know, the water soluble versus fat soluble. So let's look at water soluble antioxidants. That's down here in this other portion of the test. There we go. These are the water soluble antioxidant markers, and they're both okay. All right. Well, cross that off your list of things to worry about. So we're like, mitochondria not looking so great. DNA seems like it's getting protected. And then our third category of what could go wrong here would be lipids or fats. So lipids or fats could get oxidized. Inflammation is going to really screw them up. And we have these markers that I will point out here. So handy. Well, first of all, we're talking about fat now. Cell membranes in the brain. Fat-soluble antioxidants, not looking so good. Wow, these are scary. These are all patients of mine, you guys. These are not like made-up labs. When you're working with a patient, you know, I always try to sugarcoat this stuff and make it seem not so bad. But man, I wouldn't want to walk around like this. Look, CoQ10 and alpha tocopherol levels both low. Vitamin A and beta carotene low. And look at this person's lipid peroxides. They're through the roof. Man. So that's a person whose fats are just getting thrashed, right? They don't have any of the protection, the fat-soluble antioxidants, and the lipids are getting oxidized. So you might as well just take, I mean, if you could get like a microscopic little gun into the human body and start like shooting away at cell membranes, that's what would happen, right? This is like free radicals are hitting cell membranes and destroying them. And they're hitting the fats in the brain and screwing that system up as well, right? So that's not going to be someone who's very healthy or happy. So it's lipid damage here, fat-soluble antioxidants, and the lipid peroxides are screwed up. So if that much is going on, and this isn't part of the official lecture, then you should skip down and look at the omega-3 and omega-6 fats themselves. And these are, you know, I would say indirectly very important for aging. And look at this person. Okay, omega-3 is low, omega-6s are okay. So this person has got a lot of fat damage going on, and they're super low in omega-3s. So their anti-aging program would be to boost up their mitochondria. Let's just review this real quick. Remember, there's 3 things for mitochondria. You should remember by the end of today. And they are magnesium, CoQ10, and oxygen. So magnesium is low. That's a mitochondrial issue. CoQ10, also low big mitochondrial problem. So they need breathing exercises, high dose CoQ10, high dose magnesium as an anti-aging component, right, to get their mitochondria working. And then the DNA markers were okay. Remember, we saw there wasn't much going on there. And then the lipids would be the third category. And the lipids were a living nightmare, so they needed a lot of help. Okay, not only were the omega-3s low, but the fats are getting damaged. And there's your anti-aging program for this particular patient. DNA is fine. We're going to work on your mitochondria. We're going to work on your fat-soluble antioxidants and protecting your lipids. Do a program for 6 months. We're going to retest. These markers are all better, then hallelujah. They're going to be, we just saved you from some catastrophic chronic illness. All right. And let's see. Let's look at another one. So again, I'm going to repeat this one more time at the risk of being a little boring. Oh, wait a minute. Is that the same person? Oh, well. There's a bunch of other things wrong, but let's just skip on. I don't want to like beat a dead horse, as they say. So remember, big picture causes of aging that pretty much everyone in the scientific community agrees on. This is not a naturopathic, I'm wearing my Birkenstocks in a health food store kind of idea. This is like big companies, big research universities. Aging triggered by oxidative stress and inflammation. They don't understand anything about these labs, obviously, but they understand where the aging process is coming from. So we're not extrapolating or making things up or going out on a limb here. This is scientific community consensus information. Aging is triggered by oxidative stress. Aging is triggered by inflammation. All we're doing is putting a major functional medicine lab-based approach into that equation, right? Oh, Kim says she's a naturopath and she's never worn Birkenstocks. I wear Birkenstocks every day, so I'll just tell you my Birkenstock story. So in my 20s, I wore Birkenstocks all the time. It's true. And when I was in college, the joke about Danny was that if you put me in a closet, I would probably sprout, because in my dorm room, I had platters of like trays of, well, in my dorm room on the windowsill, I had trays of wheatgrass that I was growing, so I could choose the wheatgrass. And then in the closet, I had all these, mason jars with the special netting on them where I was making my own sprouts. This is so funny. But anyways, so then there's like a 30-year period, no Birkenstocks. I forgot about them. And then for Father's Day, my son gave me a pair of Birkenstocks. And apparently, he's 20 now, apparently 20-year-olds now think Birkenstocks are really cool again, which is so funny. If you wait long enough, the fashion cycle comes all the way back around. So ironically, I wear Birkenstocks regularly now because they were my son's Father's Day present, and he was trying to make me a little hipper as a dad, not knowing that 30 years ago, way before he was born, I was wearing the exact same shoes. All right, let's see here. But I divert. That has nothing to do with anti-aging. Okay, let's get back on track. Sorry. But you know what? There's a method to the madness, because every 12, human beings can only pay attention for like 12 minutes, 14 minutes if you're brilliant. And so you need a little mental relief every 12 to 14 minutes, little side story there, and we can come back and focus now. Oh my gosh, where did we get this lab from? One of my great content people, Sharon, pulled this one. All right, well, this is complicated, but we got the time, so let's get into it. So usually, this is just like a mentorship class, by the way, where we pull up labs in class every week, and it's like, hey, it doesn't matter where you are in the curriculum, you got a person with low homocysteine, you got to deal with it. So in the context of today's class, we're talking about homocysteine being high being a problem and inflammation, right? But what about low homocysteine? So this brings up a huge topic. I just want to point this out so you're aware that homocysteine levels can go too low as well as they can go too high. Oxidative stress can go too low. You can have not enough oxidative stress. It's not a less is better situation all the way down to zero. In fact, if everyone listening right now, if we were not all experiencing oxidative stress, we would be dead, because your mitochondria would have stopped. And I don't know how long it would take you or me to fall to the floor, but you'd be dead in a few seconds, right? It'd be like game over, just boof. So too much oxidative stress is bad. Not enough is a whole nother problem. Too much homocysteine is bad, not enough is a whole other problem. Even when it comes down to inflammation, obviously too much inflammation is bad, but you can have an under-inflamed patient as well. Someday I would love to do a talk on that for you guys, okay? So I just want you to know that we're talking about too much oxidative stress, too much inflammation, all these things, as if it's only high is bad. But for every one of these markers that we look at today, inflammatory markers, mitochondrial markers, all of these, not enough inflammation, not enough oxidative stress is a more advanced level of problem. Okay. So magnesium, low. What do you want to do dosage-wise? Try to get them back to normal. I always start with 400 to 600 milligrams a day, and then I'll bring it up if I have to. Usually if you bring up magnesium too high, then people get loose stool or diarrhea. So I find usually around 600 is comfortable for most people. If you can get it up to 800, more power to you. You're trying to boost magnesium every 6 months by 1 quintile. So if you give someone enough magnesium, 6 months later, they should bump up 1 quintile to the right, okay? So again, if you're underdosing them, you'll see that it doesn't move. And you don't want them to take a high dose of magnesium forever. You just want to get that into the normal range. Okay, so this person had low magnesium. Oh, here we go again with the CoQ10. Okay, it's like CoQ10 day. Same thing with CoQ10, 100 milligrams, probably won't do anything. Probably have to give 200, 400, 600. It's expensive, but you just got to deal with that. And you want to bring up the CoQ10 by 1 quintile every 6 months. Okay, tell the patient this isn't forever. We're going to use these higher dosages just till we get your mitochondria back online. And this person has low lipid peroxides. That's a good thing. This person has, oh, here's an interesting problem. They have the omega-3 problem that we saw in the last case, but this one is a little different in that they also have low omega-6. And so here, this one's famous, right? Gamma-linolenic, that's GLA. So that marker's low, you give them GLA. That's evening primrose oil, those kinds of things, right? And then when this one's low here, arachidonic, usually we think about arachidonic acid being a problem when it's high, right? And when it's high, you're worried about all these inflammatory processes, eicosanoids are all screwed up, and immune system's messed up. But what about when it's low? Okay, that's a whole nother level of problem. And they need the GLA, they need the omega-6s to bring these up. And like historically, I think we think about omega-3 as being anti-inflammatory, and we think about omega-6 not that much. If the person is low in omega-6, they're going to have all kinds of health problems related to eicosanoids, just like if they're low in omega-3s. So you got to put 6s and 3s together at the same priority level in your head. And for me, this is a reorientation because I spent most of my career just giving people 3s left and right and hoping that would work, not realizing how many of my patients needed omega-6 nutrients. So anyways, this is something to keep aware of. When you're working with inflammation, don't just go down the fish oil only pathway. You want to give them 6s when they need them as well. All right, and then let's just cut down here, and I'll open it up for questions in the last few minutes here. And someone asked earlier about mTOR. Is there a test for mTOR? Well, there is now. And this is a whole nother 3-hour talk, which is that I'm just going to go over this in 60 seconds, just so you guys are aware of this, all right? Is that when you're looking at an organic acids test and you're looking at these energy production markers in particular, you're looking at these markers here. When you see a whole variety of these markers low, undetected, right? That can mean it's a complicated assessment, but that can mean that the person is hypometabolic, meaning that they don't have enough mitochondria to make these energy production pathways run. So you can get what we call false negatives on these labs sometimes, right? Where so many of these markers are low that you're thinking, oh, that whole section looks fine because I was trained that these markers are a problem if they're high. But a large percentage of these initial organic acids markers being low can mean that the person is failing in their ability to produce proteins from amino acids. Okay, and that's an mTOR related problem. So it's complicated, and as you know, probably takes a couple months to figure that stuff out, but something to be on the lookout for. Not to do with inflammation at all, though, really, in some ways. Well, kind of indirectly, but not really about today's talk. Let's see if there's another section here. Oh, here, this just says some good news for this person. So this person is fine with their water-soluble antioxidant markers. Okay, so quick little summary here when we're looking at this. Remember, oxidative stress and inflammation are the two biggies. We're thinking about what triggers that. Inflammation is in the brain, is it in the gut, is it from toxins? Is it a blood sugar, insulin response problem, right? Those are all classic, we see all the times. Oxidative stress, where's it coming from? Is it chemicals? Is it heavy metals? Is it, you know, an elite athlete that's riding their bicycle thousands of miles a month? You know, is it someone who is caring for a parent that's dying and they're stressed out of their mind? Is it emotional? Is it chemical? Is it physical? You know, where is it coming from? Could be physical. Any of these things can cause it. And then once you get that big picture, okay, oxidative stress is high, inflammation is high, then you want to boil it down to what's getting damaged. Is the mitochondria damaged? Is the DNA getting damaged? Are the lipids getting damaged? How do we know the mitochondria are messed up? The mitochondria markers are going to be high. Basic ones, CoQ10 and magnesium, right? How do we know the DNA is getting messed up? Well, you look at those DNA, the water-soluble antioxidant markers, right? They'll tell you right away. How do I know the lipids are screwed up? Low levels of the fat-soluble antioxidants and high lipid peroxides, right? So you can tell all this stuff from the testing. And you know, once you learn how to read these labs, you can figure this out in like 5 minutes looking at a lab and know exactly what potential disease process this person is facing. Lipids are screwed up, heart disease, brain-related problems, mitochondria are screwed up. They're going to be exhausted, right? And have just profound fatigue problems. Obviously, their DNA is getting messed up, high risk for developing a tumor, cancers. And so you can see these things coming decades in advance, whether it's cancer, heart disease, diabetes, neurological conditions, all this stuff can be spotted with the labs that we do way in advance. And that's kind of the point, is that it's not just about anti-aging, but also about, you know, preventing a disease process. So I've talked a lot about Richard today. We have a free offer for you guys too, if you're interested in one of these master classes he's done for the Kalish Institute. And this gets into what I touched on just for a moment about mitochondria and mTOR and hypometabolic states. And Richard's talking about all his latest research on this. So that's a freebie if you're interested in, you know, learning a little bit more. It's a pretty technical talk. Like, I've listened to it like 3 or 4 times and I'm still kind of absorbing it. So if you're really into the technical stuff, I think you'll like it, and the sciencey part of all this, right? Okay, so let's do a few questions here. We got a few minutes left. I'm going to go back to the very beginning. When we first started here. Let's see. Yes, we will have a recording, and I'm sure the Fullscript people, who are the nicest, smartest people in the world, will be able to figure out how to send that out to you because they're computer savvy. And thank you, Fullscript, by the way, for even letting me do this. I really mean that. When we're at the IFM meetings, I always want to go over to their booth because they're like the cool people that you want to hang out and talk with. If you're not, well, first of all, if you're not going to conferences, you got to go to conferences. And when you go to conferences, make sure you go to the Fullscript booth and see what I mean. You'll be like, wow, Dan was right. These are really nice people. I like talking to them. And obviously they have a really great service. And I'm like the biggest Fullscript fan in the world. After 20 years of selling supplements, I'm 100% converted to Fullscript now. I'm like a poster child for success with their company. If only for one thing, I'm not supposed to be talking about this, but if only for one thing, just because I no longer have to collect sales tax from patients. And by the way, if you are not collecting sales tax from patients and you're selling your own supplements, you better call a tax attorney and your CPA, like, you know, tomorrow morning. And then if you just don't even want to worry about it, just switch over and have Fullscript. They'll do all the tax stuff for you. But don't do your sales tax wrong. You're going to get in serious trouble with the government. It's not a good thing. Let's see. Oh, I'm looking at the questions here. Sorry. Recording, yes. Yes, some people can hold their breath. David Blaine, you can look it up about holding the breath. Yeah, maybe David Blaine is faking it. I don't know. It looks like he's underwater the whole time. So the testing for mTOR, the cool testing for mTOR that Patrick asked about is listen to Richard's masterclass, and he'll get into that. Okay, it's not exactly what you think, but it's complex. And Jan was saying about breaking down the gut microbiome. Kimberly is claiming to be a naturopath, but never have worn Birkenstocks, which we think is funny. Um, Michael doesn't wear shoes. I went to college with a guy that didn't wear shoes ever, too. God bless those people. High dose of CoQ10. So it's super expensive. 200, 400 a day, 600 milligrams a day is a lot. It's a price related thing. Some of the more sophisticated doctors I work with, use 1,000 milligrams of CoQ10. It just costs a fortune. So I usually keep it around 200 to 400 a day. Some of the companies will sell a 200 milligram tablet, so it's only 2 pills a day. It's pricey for a bottle of it. I think I already mentioned on the magnesium. Oh, and then one other kind of side note is that if you're using magnesium and it's not working, make sure that you include some N-acetylcysteine with the magnesium. A couple thousand milligrams of N-acetylcysteine will help the person use magnesium much more effectively. If they've been on magnesium for a long time, it's really not working. That usually will help. Form of magnesium that I'm using, I use it, bound to carrier molecule, could be citrate, could be magnesium citrate, could be a buffered magnesium. There's a bunch of choices. If you want to get super fancy on choosing your magnesium, I'll show you a way to do that. You don't have to do this. This is like advanced beyond advanced, but if you want to answer the question properly, you can see here on the organic acids where the person is low. So like this person is low in citrate. So why not give them magnesium citrate? They get the magnesium they need and they get the citrate they need. How smart is that? So that's another way you can kind of break it down. Maybe somebody's low in malate and you want to give them the right kind of magnesium. You can give them magnesium malate. I don't usually get that detail oriented. I usually just give them a broad spectrum magnesium that's bound to a bunch of carrier molecules, like a general chelated magnesium, is usually what I do. But if you want to get fancy, you can. Yeah, so when homocysteine is very low, yes, that is a very interesting thing. And I think it hedges around this whole methylation problem, maybe some sulfation problems, and there's going to be some genetic issues. So Michelle is right on track there. Do I use the ion as initial testing? You know what? I try to get every new patient to do an ion panel. Like if for only one reason, like if you don't know the status of their omega-6s, like how are you going to make any kind of intelligent decisions about what to do? Just for that one little part of the test. And I'll tell you, I'm just thinking about things that I've screwed up so many times. Like I said, how many times have I given a patient omega-3s and they needed the 6s? A lot. And what's the point of doing the wrong thing for 6 months or a year? They're going to spend more on the wrong supplements than they would have spent on the test, So I definitely recommend the ion panel as an upfront test. Don't use it as a problem-solving thing, because you can, you'll save the patient money in the long run on supplements that they don't need. Organic acid screening. So the organic acids are done by urine. Great Plains does them, Genova does them. They're under organic acids, Nutraval, and the Great Plains test. Those are the ones that I know the best. Mark Newman does them over at Dutch now too, but just a few he does on his Dutch panel. And then the rest of this ion panel is blood work, okay? So the ion panel is a combination of blood and urine together. How important is vitamin D? Oh, vitamin D is mission critical. That's in the top 5 super important things for sure, which is optimizing vitamin D levels. So easy, right? Just test them every year. So do I have a functional range for the 8-OHDG? Absolutely. You want the 8-OHDG below a 4, but not in the all the way down at the low end of the range here. Let me show you here real quick. We got another 2 minutes. I'm going to try to get through the questions real quick. So 8-OHDG, here it is. So you want it, if it's above a 4, it's a problem. I learned that from Walter Crinian. Saddest thing that happened recently is Walter died. One of the brightest human beings I've ever met, just the father of environmental toxicology. Walter Crinian. If you don't know Crinian's work, you should look it up. Just a brilliant man. It's very sad that he died. If it's down in the lowest quintile, then you have a problem potentially too. You have to correlate that with other things, but you don't want it too low, right? So which ion panel, 20 or 40 amino acids? You can do either. The 40 is a little overwhelming. If you're new to it, I would do the 20. If you've been doing this for a while, I would, up it to the 40. You can lessen the need for CoQ10 if you lose higher dosages of alpha lipoic. So that's great. because alpha-lipoic is inexpensive. That was a tip from Michael. Thank you, Michael. Let's see here. Yeah, let's see. Do blood amino acids indicate short-term or long-term nutritional or catabolic state? That's a tricky question. You can completely change every one of these organic acid, well, that's not true. You can completely change many of these organic acids markers and the blood amino acid markers by getting the person on a free-form amino acid supplement for a couple days right before the test. I mean, I don't advise doing that because it just makes things really complicated. But assuming that the person is just eating their regular diet and they're not taking any free-form amino acid supplements, I think you'll find the amino acid testing quite accurate. But if they've just been on free-form amino acids right up until they did the test, it's going to skew the results. So you want to try to avoid that, okay? All right, I think we're running out of time. Thank you for all your questions and interest here. I want to wrap it up at the hour. And I'm sure we'll be back and doing more of these in the future as well, okay? Take care, everyone. We'll catch up with you next time.